The church was stunning, filled with lavish white roses, gold accents, and an audience dressed to impress. But all the beauty in the world couldn't cover the tension hanging in the air like fog. As the music swelled, all eyes turned to the grand oak doors. They opened slowly, and there she was, Emily, holding a bouquet of simple wildflowers, wearing a second-hand dress altered by hand. Her face was calm, but her eyes scanned the crowd nervously. At the altar, William, tall, striking, and arrogant, turned to look at her, and smirked, a smug, unmistakable smirk. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Emily saw it. So did everyone else. A few of William's friends chuckled under their breath. One even whispered something behind his palm, barely concealing his mockery. Emily's hands tightened around her bouquet, but she kept walking, head high, back straight. Her heart was pounding, but not from excitement, from humiliation. She had dreamed of this day her whole life, but not like this. Not with a man who saw her as less, not with whispers instead of cheers. When she reached the altar, William leaned in and murmured through his perfect white teeth, "Didn't they have a better dress at the thrift store?" The priest cleared his throat, unaware. Emily didn't flinch. She stared ahead, her lips forming the smallest of smiles. That was the first moment William should have realized something was off, but his ego was too inflated to see it. He believed he was the one holding the power in this relationship, but he had no idea what storm he had just married. The ceremony dragged on, a blur of vows, blessings, and forced smiles. William's family barely looked at Emily, except his sister Clara, who watched with silent interest. She noticed the way Emily held herself. She noticed how nothing seemed to shake her. It wasn't pride, it was control. Clara made a mental note. After all, in their family, nothing happened without a motive. And Clara had seen enough arranged marriages to know when one didn't follow the usual script. The reception was a theater of cruelty. William gave a speech full of backhanded compliments, veiled jokes about humble beginnings, and beauty and simplicity. His friends roared with laughter. Emily smiled politely, even toasted him. But behind that calm exterior, her mind was racing. She remembered her mother's words. Patience is the weapon of the underestimated. She hadn't come here to be loved. She had come for answers, and maybe even revenge. Later that night, Emily sat alone in their honeymoon suite, while William partied with his friends downstairs. She looked around the lavish room, the silk sheets, the champagne, the untouched cake. None of it felt real. She took off her dress quietly, folded it with care, and placed it inside her suitcase. Then she sat by the window and stared out into the city lights, her reflection staring back at her. "You're in," she whispered to herself. "Now the game begins." William eventually stumbled into the room at 3 a.m., half drunk and arrogant. He didn't speak to her, just passed out on the bed without a second glance. Emily watched him from the armchair. She took out a notebook from her suitcase, faded leather, pages yellowed with time. Inside were names, dates, and photos. This wasn't a love story. It was a plan, and every move from this night forward had already been considered. Flashback, a younger Emily, standing outside a large estate with her mother, crying. "This is your father's house," her mother whispered, "but we're not welcome here." That moment never left her. Not the shame, not the injustice. And now, years later, she had stepped inside that very world, not as a maid, not as a guest, but as a bride. Emily had promised her mother she would one day confront the truth. Tonight, that truth was asleep on a king-sized bed, unaware that his new wife already knew too much. Morning came. William was hungover, annoyed by the sunlight. Emily greeted him with coffee, a soft smile on her lips. He barely grunted in response. "We should talk about the honeymoon," she offered. "I was thinking something quiet, private." William scoffed. "You don't make those decisions," he replied, reaching for his phone. But Emily wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the photo frame on the nightstand. A photo of William as a child, held by a man she recognized instantly. Her fingers twitched. That man was the missing piece. What William didn't know, couldn't have imagined, was that this marriage wasn't the beginning of his fairy tale. It was the start of his unraveling, and Emily, the girl he mocked, was the one holding the thread. Emily had never been good at pretending, but now every breath was a performance. The first morning as Mrs. Lancaster was quiet, almost clinical. William, despite the vows exchanged, treated her like a tenant he hadn't approved of, barely acknowledging her presence. But that suited her just fine. Let him underestimate her. That's when people reveal themselves. Downstairs, the estate bustled with post-wedding arrangements. Staff cleared decorations, catered to guests packing to leave, and tried not to speak too loudly about how strange the wedding had been. Clara, William's sister, watched Emily from the library window. Something about the bride's composure disturbed her. She wasn't angry, she wasn't trying. She was studying, calculating. Clara had seen that look before. In their late grandfather, the old patriarch who built the Lancaster Empire with cutthroat precision. "Morning," Clara said as Emily passed by the doorway. Emily stopped, surprised but not unsettled. "Good morning," she replied, pausing just enough for silence to stretch. "You're staying here, right?" Clara asked. Emily nodded. William insisted. They both knew that was a lie. Clara tilted her head. "Did he?" Emily smiled politely. The two women held eye contact longer than was comfortable. A silent war had begun. Later that day, a family meeting was called. In the study, it wasn't optional. William walked in late, yawning, wearing sunglasses indoors. Emily sat quietly at his side, hands folded. The lawyer, a stiff man named Mr. Greaves, stood beside a locked case. "We're here to finalize the reading of Mr. Harold Lancaster's final testament," he began, referring to William's recently deceased grandfather. "As you all know, Harold believed in tradition, but he also believed in consequences." William rolled his eyes. Emily leaned forward, pretending interest. Mr. Greaves opened the case and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "To my grandson William, I leave my controlling shares of Lancaster Holdings under one condition." The room shifted. William sat up. "Condition," he repeated. Greaves nodded. "Yes, that you remain legally married to Emily for no less than 1 calendar year. If the marriage is dissolved before that, the shares revert to the board and your claim is void." Silence fell. Then, "That's a joke, right?" William's voice cracked with disbelief. His father shifted uncomfortably. Clara stared directly at Emily, who hadn't moved. Mr. Greaves continued. "Harold believed marriage should not be a transaction. If William is capable of honoring the vow, then he's capable of leading." William shot to his feet. "She's a waitress," he barked. "She doesn't belong here." Emily turned her head slowly toward him. "And yet, here I am." The words hung in the air like a knife. William stormed out. No one followed. Mr. Greaves cleared his throat. "You have 1 year. Make it work, or lose it all." Clara's expression didn't change, but her curiosity deepened. That was when she remembered something. A photograph, long hidden in one, of her grandfather's books. She needed to find it. That night, Emily walked the garden paths alone. She remembered being there as a child, just once, clinging to her mother's hand as they were escorted off the property. The roses were the same, so were the men who had laughed then and who laughed now, but she wasn't that girl anymore. She was inside now, and she wasn't leaving empty-handed. William avoided her for days, staying out late, sleeping in guest rooms. Emily didn't mind. She spent time getting to know the staff, asking quiet questions about Harold. Who visited him often? Who did he trust? Bit by bit, they answered, and Emily took notes. She learned that Harold had once hired a private investigator years ago. No one knew why. Meanwhile, Clara searched her grandfather's study. After hours of rifling through papers and ledgers, she found the photo. It was old, bent at the corners. It showed her grandfather beside a woman with sharp eyes and a child clinging to her skirt. Clara stared at the child's face. Her blood ran cold. She took the photo to her room, placed it on her desk, and whispered, "Who are you, Emily?" Emily, in her room, took out her notebook again. She added a new name to the list, Clara Lancaster, not as an enemy, but as a possibility, someone smart enough to see patterns, and maybe, just maybe, someone who could help her. At dinner the next evening, William arrived late again. This time he didn't sit far away. He sat beside Emily, jaw clenched. "What are you playing at?" he muttered between bites. She didn't look at him. "Just being your wife," she replied sweetly. "Isn't that what you wanted?" William narrowed his eyes. "Don't think I won't find a way out of this." Emily finally turned to him, and for the first time, her mask slipped. "I hope you try," she said. "Really, I do." William stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time, but it was already too late. Emily had been planning this moment her entire life. Rain tapped softly against the stained glass windows of the Lancaster estate. The storm outside was a whisper compared to the tension inside. Emily stood alone in the hallway, staring at a faded portrait of Harold Lancaster in his younger years. His eyes held the same cold ambition she saw in William, but something else too. Regret. Emily reached out and touched the edge of the frame, her fingers pausing at the date etched into the brass, October 1994, the same month her mother had run from this place. Downstairs, William argued with his lawyer on speakerphone. "There has to be a way out," he insisted. "A loophole, something." But the voice on the other end was clear. "It's airtight. You leave her, you lose the company. That's it." William slammed the phone down. He wasn't used to losing. But the idea of being chained to Emily for a year, it made his skin crawl. He knew she was hiding something. The calm, the control. It wasn't love. It was calculation. Emily moved like a shadow through the estate. She listened, she watched, and slowly she found her allies. Not the rich, not the powerful, but the ones who had always been invisible. The housekeeper, Mrs. Penrose, whispered stories from decades past about Harold's mistress, a young woman with fire in her eyes and secrets in her blood. Emily asked for details, dates, places. Each whisper became a thread, and Emily was the one weaving them into a net. In the old archives room, she discovered a worn box labeled H. Lancaster, private. Inside, dozens of letters tied with black ribbon. Her heart raced as she untied them. The first one was addressed to R., her mother's initial. The words were intimate, remorseful, and ended with a line that made her hands tremble. "If our child ever returns here, may they forgive me." She stayed up the entire night reading them, piecing together the truth. Her mother had loved Harold, but she had also been silenced, pushed out, paid off. And Emily had been the living evidence of a scandal too dangerous to expose. But now the secret was back, walking the halls of the Lancaster Empire, dressed as a bride. Meanwhile, Clara paced her room, the photo still on her desk. She knew the child in the picture was Emily, but if Emily was Harold's daughter, that made her William's cousin, or worse. She needed to know more before confronting anyone. So she went to the one place no one else dared, Harold's old safe. It took her 3 hours and 2 broken nails, but she got it open. Inside, documents, photos, and a single cassette tape, labeled Confession, 2001. She found an old player and hit play. Harold's voice crackled to life. If anyone finds this, I failed. I loved her, and I destroyed her. I should have claimed my daughter, but I let them exile her. And if she returns, tell her I'm sorry. Clara sat frozen. Her hands trembled. Emily wasn't just a girl from nowhere. She was blood. At breakfast, the table was quiet. William sat stiffly across from Emily, still plotting. Clara joined them late, eyes red from lack of sleep. She stared at Emily for a long time before saying anything. "You look like someone I used to know," she murmured. Emily raised an eyebrow. "Do I?" Clara nodded. She was brave and very smart, dangerous even. William looked up, annoyed. "What are you two talking about?" Neither answered him. Later, William found Emily in the study reading again. "You think you're clever," he snapped. "But this, whatever this is, it won't last." Emily looked up from her book. "You should be careful who you threaten," she said. "Some women break, others remember." William scoffed, but he was starting to feel it. The shift. The way people looked at her now. The way the staff spoke to her. The way Clara had suddenly become distant. He wasn't in control anymore. That night, Emily took out a small velvet box from her luggage. Inside, a ring. Not her wedding band, but another one. A man's ring. Her father's. The only thing her mother had kept. She stared at it for a long time, then placed it gently beside her bed. Tomorrow she would visit Harold's grave. It was time to have a word with the man who had started this story and never finished it. The Lancaster. Bembley burial grounds lay hidden behind a high hedge at the edge of the estate, private, discreet, reserved for those whose names shaped legacies. Emily had never been there before. The morning air was damp with mist as she walked the winding stone path alone, clutching a single white lily. No cameras, no watchers, just her and the silent rows of names carved into cold marble. She found Harold's headstone easily, polished, grand and arrogant even in death. She knelt in front of it. For a long time she didn't speak. Then, softly, "I found your letters." Her voice trembled, but not from grief. "You said if I returned, I should forgive you." She placed the lily against the stone. "But you never gave me the chance to grow up with a father. You let them erase me. You let them laugh at my mother." Her jaw tightened. "I'm not here for your money. I'm here for the truth." The wind rustled through the trees. Emily closed her eyes. "And I'm going to find it." Clara watched from a distance. She had followed Emily without being seen. As she watched the woman speak to her grandfather's grave, her suspicion became certainty. Emily was family. She wasn't an intruder. She was a rightful heir. And suddenly, Clara felt the ground shift beneath her. What did that make her? A protector, a betrayer? Back at the estate, William paced his room like a trapped animal. His father had warned him years ago, never let emotion into business. But this wasn't business anymore. Emily was getting into people's heads, into his head, and worse, his control was slipping. At dinner, his own cousin had corrected him in front of guests. About the company. Emily had said nothing, just smiled. That smile, it haunted him. When Emily returned, Clara was waiting in the drawing room. "Can we talk?" she asked. Emily nodded. The two sat opposite each other, silence thick between them. Clara reached into her coat and pulled out the photograph, the one with the woman and the little girl. She laid it on the table. "That's you, isn't it?" Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. Clara continued, "He loved your mother. I remember her. She brought light into this house for a very short time. Then she was gone, and no one ever said why." Emily looked at the photo for a long moment. "My mother died 2 years ago," she said. "She never stopped loving him, even after everything." Clara nodded slowly. You could destroy this. A family, you know. Emily met her eyes. I don't want to destroy it. I want to expose it. Clara took a breath. That's worse. But there was no accusation in her voice, just truth. Meanwhile, William was digging too. He had hired a private investigator, James Carter, known for his discretion and lack of morality. William didn't care about legality. He wanted dirt. Find out who she really is, he ordered. I don't care how far you have to go. Carter nodded. If there's something buried, I'll dig it up. William leaned back. Good, because she's not staying here a year. That night, Emily found a sealed envelope on her nightstand. Inside, a photo. Her and her mother at a market, years ago. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, they will never see. You coming, and that's your greatest strength. Emily traced the words with her finger. Her mother had prepared her for this, every lesson, every scar, every warning. The following morning, Emily began phase 2 of her plan. She called a meeting with the family's financial advisor, Mr. Lyle. It raised eyebrows. No new bride had ever been allowed in those meetings, but Emily insisted, and Lyle, curious himself, agreed. As she walked into the boardroom in a fitted navy suit, William stared in disbelief. You don't belong in here, he snapped. Emily sat down across from him. Neither do liars, but here we are. The meeting was brutal. Emily asked sharp questions about offshore accounts, about board decisions made without full consent. Lyle tried to deflect, but she came armed with documentation. Clara watched in silence, caught between admiration and fear. This wasn't a fragile bride. This was a strategist, a storm dressed in velvet. Afterward, William cornered her. What are you doing? He hissed. What is this really about? Emily stepped closer. If you want the truth, she whispered, you're not ready for it, but don't worry, it's coming. She walked away, heels echoing through the marble hallway. William didn't follow. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what move to make. And high above, hidden in the attic, the old housekeeper, Mrs. Penrose, unlocked a dusty drawer. Inside, a box labeled Rosewood 1994. She opened it slowly. Photos, letters, a lock of hair, and at the bottom, a certificate. Birth, faded by. Time, Emily's name. A father listed Harold Lancaster. She took a deep breath and closed the box. The past wasn't buried. It was about to roar. Mrs. Penrose had served 3 generations of Lancasters. She had washed their linens, heard their arguments, and seen more secrets than anyone ever should. But as she stood holding Emily's birth certificate, her hands trembled with a weight she had buried for decades. She had been there that summer when Harold received the letter that changed everything. He had gone pale, locked himself in his study for 2 days, and emerged with a decision. Silence. Meanwhile, Emily stood before a mirror in the guest room that had become hers. Her eyes no longer carried the innocence of a bride. They were sharper now, focused. She ran her fingers down the edge of a folder resting on her vanity. Inside were copies of Harold's letters, pages from the estate ledgers, and one ultrasound photo that her mother had kept. Her existence had been inconvenient, erased. Now it would become undeniable. That morning, Clara entered Emily's room unannounced. She didn't apologize. She carried a manila envelope and a strange look in her eyes. You need to see this, she said, handing it over. Emily opened it slowly. Bank records, transfers made to her mother for over a decade, amounts large enough to keep someone quiet. Clara spoke carefully. He paid her to disappear, but he kept paying. Emily stared at the figures. So he never forgot us, she murmured. Clara added, no, but he was still a coward. Downstairs, William sat with James Carter, who had returned with more than expected. Her mother's name was Rose Taylor, Carter explained. She worked at a law office Harold used to use. They had an affair, got her pregnant. He denied it, but eventually paid her off to avoid scandal. William's knuckles whitened. "Does that make Emily?" Carter nodded grimly. "Your aunt." The room seemed to tilt. William staggered backward. "That's not possible." Carter simply said, "It is, and it's about to get worse." Emily stood before Harold's portrait in the great hall. Later that day, clutching the folder to her chest, Clara joined her quietly. "Are you going to tell them?" she asked. Emily was silent. Then, "I want them to feel what we felt. The shame. The silence." Clara exhaled. "Be careful, Emily. This house eats people like us." Emily met her gaze. "Then I'll be the first one it chokes on." That night, during a formal dinner with the board of Lancaster Holdings present, Emily stood up. The room fell silent. She placed a small envelope on the table before William. "I think it's time everyone knew who I really am." He hesitated. "Don't." She opened it herself and slid the document across the table. Murmurs broke out. William's father's face drained of color. "I'm Harold Lancaster's biological daughter," Emily said calmly. "Conceived during a long-term affair, denied, hidden, and paid into silence. But I'm not silent anymore." Gasps filled the room. One of the board members asked, "Do you have proof?" Emily handed over the letters. "It's all here, and the birth certificate. And there's one more thing." She paused for impact. "Under state law, I have the legal right to claim a portion of this estate." William exploded. "She's lying." But Mrs. Penrose entered quietly and said, "No, she's not." Everyone turned. The old woman held the original certificate. "I kept it just in case. I was there. I held the baby. Harold swore me to secrecy." She placed the paper on the table. But the truth finds a way. Chaos erupted. "The board," whispered urgently. William stormed out. Clara stayed seated, staring at Emily with awe and a hint of fear. Emily, calm as ever, looked around the room. "I'm not here to dismantle this family," she said, "but I won't live in its shadow anymore." Later that evening, William confronted Clara in the corridor. "You knew?" he accused. "You helped her." Clara didn't flinch. "I helped the truth. Something this family's never been good at." He spat. "She's a fraud." Clara's voice was ice. "She's your aunt. Show some respect." In her room, Emily sat quietly, the house now humming with gossip and fear. She had done what she came to do, but she also knew this was just the beginning. They wouldn't let her win without a fight. And in revealing the truth, she had exposed herself to enemies far more dangerous than she imagined. She picked up her mother's photo. "You were right," she whispered. "They never saw me coming." The days following Emily's revelation were a storm of whispers, private meetings, and passive-aggressive confrontations. The estate no longer breathed in unity. It wheezed under the pressure of truth. Board members scheduled emergency sessions. The press, somehow tipped off, began circling like vultures. The headlines were vague at first. "Heir's wife stuns family with inheritance claim," but the details would follow. They always did. Emily remained composed. Every glance she received in the halls, every closed door behind her, only sharpened her focus. William, on the other hand, was unraveling. His calls with the lawyer had become daily, frantic. "There must be a clause," he shouted. "She was never legitimized. She's not on the family record." But the lawyer's tone was cool. "The evidence speaks louder. If you push this, it'll go public. Do you want a media trial?" Clara kept her distance from William, but not from Emily. In quiet moments, they would share tea and long silences. "You're changing everything," Clara said one morning. "Not just the business, the air in this place. It's different now." Emily responded with a soft, worn voice. Maybe it needed changing. But even as they formed an unlikely alliance, Emily could feel Clara watching her, measuring, not out of distrust but something closer to caution. That afternoon, Mrs. Penrose warned her. "William won't go quietly, he'll dig deeper." Emily nodded. "Let him." But Penrose hesitated. "No, I mean deeper. Into your life. Your past. Anything he can use." Emily's jaw tightened. She hadn't told them everything, not even Clara. There were things in her mother's past that she had buried for good reason, and if William found them, the fallout would be brutal. Sure enough, that night, William received a file from James Carter, thick, detailed, ugly. He opened it slowly, flipping through surveillance photos, names, receipts. Then he found it, a sealed juvenile record in Emily's name, sealed but not erased. A petty crime, a stolen bracelet when she was 17. Her mother had taken the fall for it to keep her out of trouble. William's smile was slow, venomous. "Perfect," he whispered. The next morning, at a charity brunch hosted by the family, William stood up with his wineglass and said, "Before we toast, I think we should all take a moment to appreciate second chances, especially for those who once had criminal records." The silence was instant. Heads turned. Emily's eyes didn't move from his, but her spine stiffened. He had struck. Whispers erupted. Emily stood. "I see you've been digging," she said, her voice even. "But you missed the part where I was 17, and it wasn't me." William laughed coldly. "Oh, I got all the parts, including the part where your mother paid off a local sheriff to keep your name clean." Gasps. Board members frozen in confusion. Clara stood abruptly. "Enough!" But William continued. "Let's stop pretending she's some innocent truth-seeker. She's just like the rest of us, playing dirty." Emily's voice didn't rise. "You don't get to weaponize my childhood," she said. "You weren't there. You don't know what we survived." She turned to the crowd. "Yes, my mother protected me, because she was all I had, and because we lived in a world that would have chewed me up otherwise. I don't apologize for that." Later, back in her room, Emily cried for the first time. In weeks. Not from guilt, but from the cost of exposure. Every truth she revealed demanded another piece of her privacy, her past. Clara found her that evening, silent in the doorway. "He's going to burn the house down before he lets you win," she said. Emily nodded. "Then we need to let it burn, and rebuild it our way." Clara placed a folder on the table. "This is your legal claim, the original will. A paternity test. We're submitting it to the estate registrar tomorrow." Emily looked at her. "You're really with me?" Clara gave the smallest of smiles. "I'm with justice, and right now, you're the only one carrying it." That night, Emily went to the attic alone. She found an old photograph of Harold and Rose, young, smiling, a version of them no one had believed in. She held it against her chest and whispered, "I didn't come here to win. I came to end the lie." And outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The Lancaster estate had always stood as a monument to wealth, silence, and control. But now, silence gave way to murmurs, and control was cracking. The family walked on eggshells, waiting for the next blow. Everyone knew that something had shifted permanently. Emily was no longer a question mark. She was a force, and forces are either followed or feared. The following morning, the news finally broke. Lancaster heiress revealed, hidden daughter of Patriarch Files' inheritance claim. Headlines exploded across social platforms, tabloids, and news tickers. The board tried to spin it, but Emily's name was now public. The press requested interviews. Emily declined them all. "The truth doesn't need a spotlight," she told Clara. "It just needs to survive the storm." William wasn't surviving anything. He was spiraling. His reputation had taken a hit, and whispers began among board members about his leadership capacity. He stormed into the study where his father sat calmly reading. "Are you going to do something?" William demanded. His father didn't look up. About what? The truth? William clenched his jaw. She's tearing this family apart. Mr. Lancaster looked up finally. No, William, she's forcing it to reckon with itself. You should try it sometime. Later that day, Emily convened a private meeting with the family's senior legal counsel. Clara, Penrose, and Mr. Greaves were present. She laid out her plan. I want my share, publicly acknowledged, not quietly absorbed, not handed off behind. Closed doors. I want to be recognized as Harold's daughter in every legal, financial, and historical document. And I want it done before the next fiscal quarter. Mr. Greaves blinked. You're asking for war. Emily leaned forward. I'm asking for my name. That night, Emily hosted a private dinner in the East Parlor, inviting only select family members and board allies. The table was elegant, understated. She wore a simple black dress, no diamonds, no display, just power in its purest form. Composure. William arrived uninvited, already tipsy. He moved through the room like a wounded animal, bitter and sharp. What is this? He asked, raising a glass. The coronation of the ghost child. Clara stood up, voice calm. It's a strategy dinner, William. You're welcome to sit and listen. He laughed, then pointed at Emily. You really think they'll accept you? That you'll sit at the head of this table? Emily's voice was low, deadly. I don't need their acceptance. I already have the seat. She gestured toward an empty chair at the head of the table. You were just keeping it warm. The room fell silent. William's glass cracked in his hand. But he didn't lash out, not this time. He just stared at her, the rage behind his eyes slowly morphing into something else, fear. Because deep down, he finally realized she wasn't bluffing. Emily made her first executive suggestion that night. Dissolve 2 shell companies used to funnel family money into offshore accounts. She had the documents, the proof, and the votes. Clara supported her. The board members present nodded. The motion passed. William stormed out. After the dinner, Clara and Emily shared a drink by the fireplace. You didn't just take control, Clara said. You buried him in front of everyone. Emily sipped her wine. He buried himself. I just handed him the shovel. They laughed quietly, but both knew it was only a matter of time before William struck back with something bigger than words. And he did. 2 nights later, Emily returned to her room to find the door ajar. Her notebooks were gone, her photos, files, everything she had collected. The window was open, no signs of forced entry, just gone. Her heart pounded. A chessboard, stripped clean in the dead of night. Clara burst in moments later. It was him, she said. He's going scorched earth. Emily closed the window. Then so will I. She retrieved a USB drive hidden in her mirror frame. Her mother had taught her well. Always keep a duplicate. Always protect the original. He thinks he's a 1, she said, but all he did was set the next piece in motion. She met with Mr. Greaves the next morning. I want to call a vote, she said, to strip William of his executive privileges. He's a risk to this family, to this company, and to the legacy your founder tried to preserve. And if you hesitate, I'll go public with what's on this drive. Greaves hesitated, then nodded. It will be done. That evening, William received the official notice. He was suspended from all decision-making activities within the company pending further review. His hands were officially tied, his power removed. Emily watched from the window as he left the estate, suitcase in hand, fury on his face. The man who had mocked her, laughed at her, tried to erase her, was finally gone, at least for now. But Emily didn't smile. She knew better than to believe this was over. The storm hadn't passed. It was just changing direction. The estate was quiet without William, but not peaceful. His absence was a vacuum pulling tension inward. Some staff walked lighter, others avoided eye contact. Everyone knew Emily had risen, but not everyone agreed with how. Power, even justified, has a way of making people nervous, especially in a house where secrets grow like vines. Emily spent the following days re-establishing control, meeting with company auditors, stabilizing PR fallout, and rewriting policy with Clara's help. "We need transparency," she said. "No more side accounts, no more hidden deals. If we rebuild this, it's with clean hands." Clara nodded. "You'll make enemies." Emily's reply was soft. "I already have." Meanwhile, William wasn't silent. From his hotel room downtown, he was still pulling strings, subtle, venomous ones. He reached out to his old ally on the board, Thomas Bellamy, a man with a smile as thin as a blade. Bellamy had stayed quiet during Emily's rise, but now he listened. "You want her gone?" he asked. William answered, "I want the public to turn on her, permanently." Bellamy smiled. "I think I know just how." That night, a package arrived at the estate addressed to Clara. It was hand-delivered. No sender. Inside, a manila folder with press drafts, witness statements, and a photo. Emily's mother, handcuffed, surrounded by officers. The headline, "Lancaster heir's mother arrested for embezzlement fraud." Clara stared in silence. Then she stood up and walked the long corridor toward Emily's room. Emily read it all without blinking, then folded the papers and whispered, "They went after her." Clara sat beside her. "Is it true?" Emily nodded slowly. "She made mistakes, but they made her. She worked for Harold's legal team, and when they let her go, they framed her. She never recovered." Clara was quiet. "Does anyone else know?" "Not yet," Emily replied, "but they will." The next morning, the story hit the press. The timing was cruel. Emily had just begun winning the public over with her composed defiance and poise. Now they painted her as the daughter of a criminal. Illegitimate, calculated, dangerous, one editorial read. Another questioned if she had manipulated Harold on his deathbed. The narrative was shifting and fast. Board members grew cold. Meetings were cancelled. Emails ignored. Emily could feel it, the same rejection her mother had suffered. She stood in the garden alone that evening, rain soaking her blouse, hands clenched. Clara found her there. "You need to respond," she said. Emily shook her head. "Not yet. Let them underestimate me again." But in the shadows, a new betrayal was brewing. Mrs. Penrose, once loyal, had begun speaking to Bellamy in secret. She claimed to know more, claimed to have letters Emily had never seen, ones that painted her mother as more complicit than innocent. Bellamy paid her handsomely, and Mrs. Penrose, torn between guilt and greed, accepted. She told herself it was just the truth, that Emily could handle it. Emily sensed something was wrong when Penrose avoided her eyes. Then, 2 days later, a letter appeared in her room, unsigned. Inside, a photo of Penrose meeting with Bellamy and a copy of a letter Emily had never seen before. Her mother's handwriting, but darker, more desperate. "They'll never believe me. Not if he speaks first." Emily's heart dropped. Someone else had known. Another man. Her mother had been afraid not only of Harold, but of someone else in the family. A shadow she had never named. Emily stared at the name at the bottom of the letter. Arthur Bellamy, Thomas's father, Harold's former legal partner, the same man who had exiled Rose. Everything suddenly tilted. Emily confronted Penrose. The woman broke instantly, guilt pouring out. "I didn't know what he would do with it. I thought he just wanted to correct the record." Emily's voice was cold. "You sold my mother's fear to the man who ruined her." Penrose sobbed. "I loved her too. But you've stirred ghosts we never wanted back." Emily said nothing, just walked away. She called Clara that night. "We're not just fighting for power," she said. "We're fighting for the record of who we were, who we are." Clara answered, "Then we fight louder." And the next day, Emily made her first public statement, on camera, alone. "My mother was many things, flawed, frightened, fierce, but she wasn't a liar, and she wasn't a thief. I know this because I lived it. I buried her, and I carry what she couldn't say." She paused, looked directly into the lens, and "I will not be erased." The video went viral in less than 24 hours. Clipped, reshared, stitched into reactions across the internet, Emily's voice cut through the noise with quiet thunder. The sincerity in her eyes, the steel in her calm. People listened, and some began to believe her. News outlets shifted. Tone. The comments, once cruel, now split. She didn't blink. You can't fake that kind of pain. Something about her feels real. But while the tide online turned, the family estate seethed. Bellamy paced his office, jaw clenched. "She's weaponizing sympathy now," he growled. He slammed a folder onto his desk. Time for something harder, deeper. He pulled out an old company ledger, dated 1995, and began scanning entries. Then he found it. A series of off-book payments listed only under initials, AB. The amount? Massive. The timing. The week Rose disappeared. Emily, meanwhile, was preparing to take another step forward. Clara had arranged a private meeting with 2 board members who hadn't yet declared their allegiance. Emily knew she needed them to secure her official recognition, not just as an heir, but as an executive. "You need their signatures," Clara said. "If we get them, the vote passes." The meeting was civil, curious, guarded. The men were cautious, pragmatists above all. Emily didn't plead. She presented facts, ledgers, receipts, evidence. "I don't want to burn this company," she said. "I want to clean it, from the inside out." They listened, took notes, promised to review and reconvene. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Later that night, Clara handed Emily a new stack of documents, recently recovered from Harold's private safe, now unsealed by court. Order? Emily sifted through them with surgical care, contracts, legal memos. Then she found it, a sealed letter addressed not to her, but to Arthur Bellamy. Emily read the first lines aloud. "You promised to protect her, you promised me, but you chose loyalty to the firm over your soul." Her eyes darkened. "He knew," she whispered. "Harold knew Arthur had betrayed her." Clara leaned in. "There's more. Look at the second page." There, stapled behind the letter, was a photocopy of a bank transfer, Arthur Bellamy to a clinic in upstate New York, a private hospital. The date? The week after Rose left the city. She didn't. "Just run," Emily said. "She was sent away. Someone hid her, probably drugged her." And the final blow. An authorization form, unsigned but drafted. Request for temporary institutional care, R. Taylor, authorized by A. Bellamy. Emily's hands began to shake. "They locked her up," she said. "They erased her." The EG rage came in waves, cold, then burning. For years, her mother had seemed distant, broken in ways Emily couldn't name. But now, the pieces clicked. Her paranoia, her silence, her flashes of memory, they had called her unstable, because they had made her that way. Emily stood. "This isn't about inheritance anymore. This is about justice." The next morning, she filed a formal petition to open an independent investigation into the 1995 Bellamy Trust, one of the family's oldest and most secretive entities. Her request was simple: transparency. The legal team flinched. Clara whispered, "You're setting off a bomb." Emily answered, "Good." News of the investigation reached Bellamy within hours. He was furious. Red-faced and shaking, he called William, who answered from a penthouse in Manhattan. "You need to come back," Bellamy hissed. "She's going after the trust." William laughed bitterly. "You're the one who buried the past, old man. Now dig." Emily was ready for the backlash. She wasn't ready for the visitor. That evening, a woman in her late 50s appeared at the estate gate, asking to see Emily. She wore a red scarf and carried no bag. Emily met her outside. "Can I help you?" she asked. The woman spoke quietly. "My name is Elena Marsh. I worked at the upstate facility where your mother stayed. I kept one of her letters. She told me to find her daughter if anything ever happened." Eleanor reached into her coat and handed over a sealed envelope, brittle with age. Emily opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a single note, in her mother's handwriting. "They can take my name, but not my blood. She will come back here one day. She will walk among the ruins, and they will fear her because they know what they did." Emily's throat tightened. Her mother had known, had hoped, had prepared. Elena placed a hand on her shoulder. "I kept that for 28 years. I'm sorry I waited so long." Emily whispered, "You waited just long enough." She turned back toward the estate. It was time to bring the ruins down. Emily stood. In the Lancaster estate's great hall, the envelope from Elena still clutched in her hand. She stared at the chandelier above, gold, immense, dustless, like everything else in the house. But now she saw it differently, not as beauty, but as distraction. The estate wasn't a monument to legacy. It was a mask for violence, for silencing, for shame passed down like property. She met with Clara in Harold's former study. "The Bellamy Trust isn't just a slush fund," Emily said. "It's a vault, a place where the worst parts of this family's past have been buried." Clara nodded. "We always knew the Bellamys were the real enforcers. Your mother wasn't their first victim, just the one who tried to fight back." Emily leaned forward. "We need to go to court. Subpoena the full records. If we uncover where those funds went, we'll connect the dots." Clara hesitated. "You'll put targets on your back, real ones." Emily's reply was quiet, but firm. "Then they better not miss." Meanwhile, Thomas Bellamy launched his counterstrike. He called a board meeting without Emily, claimed emergency authority. "We need to vote her out," he told the room. "She's destabilizing the company. She's dragging family trauma into headlines. This isn't leadership, it's vengeance." But the board was split. Two members had aligned quietly with Clara. One had already met with Emily personally. When Bellamy moved to call the vote, it failed, 3-4. Emily stayed. Bellamy stormed out, veins bulging. In the shadows, William watched everything. From a distance. He hadn't returned to the estate, but he had eyes inside. One of the estate's junior assistants, Matthew, was feeding him updates in exchange for payment and promises. William's instructions were clear. Find out what she's planning. Get proof before she makes her move. That move came faster than anyone expected. Emily held a press conference, her first public appearance beyond the viral video. She stood outside the courthouse, Clara beside her, attorneys behind, calm, composed, unshaken. "Today I am formally petitioning for the unsealing of the Bellamy Trust and the opening of a full investigation into the institutionalization of Rose Taylor in 1995. We have evidence of financial coercion, legal manipulation, and abuse of power, designed to silence my mother and protect the name of Arthur Bellamy." Reporters erupted. Microphones surged forward. Emily continued, "This is not a family feud. This is a reckoning. My mother died carrying a truth no one would hear. I am here to finish her sentence." The footage spread like wildfire, and the reactions were not what Bellamy expected. People rallied. Former employees of the Bellamy firm began coming forward anonymously, describing a culture of cover-ups, silence, buried paperwork. A former nurse at the upstate facility came out publicly, confirming she remembered Rose. "She wasn't crazy," she said. "She was terrified." Back at the estate, Penrose watched the broadcast with shaking hands. She picked up the phone, called Clara. "There's something else. Something I never told anyone. Her voice was hoarse. "The night Rose was taken. Harold tried to stop it, but it wasn't his decision anymore. Arthur had him cornered. Financially, legally. He threatened to expose things Harold couldn't. Let's see daylight." Emily returned to her room that night and found a folder on her bed. No note, just an old cassette and a typed transcript. She played the tape, fingers cold. Harold's voice again. "To my daughter, if you're hearing, this I failed you. I tried to protect your mother, but I let fear win. Arthur controlled everything. He made me sign things I didn't understand. But I knew he wanted her gone. She was brave, braver than me. I hope you are too." Emily stared into the mirror after the tape ended. Her face was pale, her eyes burning. She whispered, "I'm not brave. I'm angry." And anger was fuel. Later that week, Clara received a call from a private investigator she'd hired months earlier, quietly, behind even Emily's back. "I found the clinic's remaining files," he said. "You'll want to see this, and there's something else." "What?" Clara asked. "A second patient, same date, same floor, different name, but same face." Clara's voice dropped. "What are you saying?" The PI answered. "Rose Taylor didn't go in alone." The file arrived in a plain black envelope. No return address, no stamp. Clara found it on her office desk just after dawn, her name scrawled in firm, unfamiliar handwriting. She closed the blinds before opening it. Inside, photographs, redacted medical charts, and 2 intake forms from the upstate clinic. One was Rose Taylor, the other Anna Devlin, an alias. But the attached photo, grainy and faded, showed a woman with nearly the same face, and standing beside her in the corner of the frame was a young girl. Clara didn't call Emily right away. She spent the whole day cross-checking dates, scouring Harold's letters, matching handwriting samples. The more she read, the more the pieces began to align, and it terrified her. When she finally dialed Emily, her voice was shaky. "Can you meet me in the East Garden? Now. Come alone." Emily arrived 20 minutes later, hair still damp from the shower. Clara handed her the folder without a word. Emily opened it, scanning the first few pages, eyes narrowing. Then she saw the photo, her breath caught. "That's my mother," she whispered. "And that's me. I was there." Clara nodded. "Yes, but that's not all. Look at the second woman." Emily stared harder. It was like looking into a distorted mirror, older, rougher, but eerily familiar. "Who is she?" Clara answered carefully. "Her name was Anna Devlin, or at least that's the name she used. She checked into the same facility the same day your mother did, and according to the files, she shared a room with her for months." Emily sat down slowly on the garden bench, the wind catching her hair. Why was she there? Clara hesitated. She was listed as a danger to herself and others. Violent outbursts, severe dissociation. But that's where it gets strange. Her file ends abruptly, transferred to an undisclosed location. Emily closed the folder, but her hands were trembling. "What does this mean?" Clara leaned in. "I think your mother wasn't the only one being silenced. And I think Anna Devlin was part of something much bigger, something that connects to your family in ways none of us understood." That night, Emily returned to the attic. She pulled down the old family photo albums, letters, anything she hadn't already scoured. She spent hours combing through them, until she found it. A Christmas photo from 1989. Clara, William, Harold, and standing beside them, a woman no one had ever named. Pale, watchful, wearing the same silver necklace that Anna Devlin wore in the clinic photo. Emily's heart dropped. She flipped the photo over, scrawled in Harold's messy cursive, "Christmas. At Ridgeview, 1989, Anna's last year with us." Emily stood up too fast, nearly knocking over the chair. Anna wasn't just anyone. She had been here, inside this house, with them. The next morning, she confronted Mr. Greaves. "What do you know about Anna Devlin?" she asked. He blinked, caught off guard. Why would you? She cut him off. She lived here. She was in photos. Then she vanished. Same as my mother. Why? He hesitated, then said, Anna was Harold's half-sister. Unacknowledged. Mentally unstable, they said. Dangerous. She attacked one of the family's lawyers during a meeting. After that, they sent her away. Emily's voice was ice. Let me guess, Arthur Bellamy handled the arrangements. Greaves nodded slowly. Emily whispered, he didn't just clean up scandals. He erased bloodlines. The implication hit her like a wave. Her mother hadn't just been silenced for shame. She had been entangled in a deeper purge, one that reached back into the Lancaster family's own hidden lineage. And Anna Devlin had known too much. Later that evening, Clara found her in the library, surrounded by files, barely blinking. We need to go to the clinic, Emily said. There's more there. Records, people. Maybe someone still remembers. Clara hesitated. What are you looking for? Emily's eyes were cold fire. Proof that this family has built its legacy on the bones of women who wouldn't play by its rules. The drive upstate was long and silent. Rain peppered the windshield as the Lancaster car wound through old forest roads toward the Ridgeview. Clinic. Clara drove. Emily sat beside her, reading the same intake report over and over, as if repetition could make the past clearer. What if there's nothing left? Clara asked softly. Emily didn't blink. Then we bring silence to light and let it scream. The clinic had long since changed names, now a privately funded wellness retreat for the ultra-wealthy. But the bones of it remained. Brick walls, narrow windows, that sterile, unnatural quiet. They were met at the front desk by a nervous director named Dr. Jensen, who smiled too much and answered questions too quickly. Unfortunately, most of her records pre-2000 were destroyed in a fire, accidental, of course. Emily slid a flash drive across the desk. We already retrieved digital backups. I'm not here for paper. I want to speak with staff who were here in 1995. Dr. Jensen flinched. That might be difficult. Clara stepped in, tone sharp. We're not asking. This is an official legal inquiry, unless you'd prefer it to become public. That worked. They were led down a back corridor, where two older nurses still worked part-time in administration. One of them, Martha Doyle, paused when shown the photo of Rose and Anna. I remember them, she said. They came in the same day. The young one, Rose, was terrified, but the other, Anna, she didn't speak. She drew pages and pages of drawings. Emily asked, Do you still have any? Martha hesitated, then motioned them to follow. In a storage room smelling of mildew and forgotten time, she unearthed a faded file box labeled simply Devlin Restricted. Inside were pages, sketches done in charcoal, jagged and frantic. But the images weren't nonsense. They were specific. Rooms, faces, a long dining table, a woman in pearls, a man with a cigar. All things Anna should never have known, unless she had lived there. Emily flipped to the last page and froze. It was a drawing of a child holding a silver bracelet. Behind her, two women. One looked like Rose, the other looked like Anna. The child was marked with a red symbol, the word beneath, ours. Clara read it too, then whispered, What does that mean? Emily couldn't answer. Her fingers found her own bracelet, one her mother had given her before passing. She used to say, I was theirs before I was hers, she murmured. I thought it meant the family, but now, I'm not sure. Suddenly Martha spoke again. Anna used to repeat something over and over. She closed her eyes, remembering. One was born, one was buried, one became the secret. We thought it was gibberish, but Emily knew better. It was a riddle, a prophecy. They thanked Martha and left, the weight of the box now pressing down like a tombstone. In the car, Emily turned to Clara. What if I wasn't just hidden? she asked. What if I was chosen? Clara frowned. Chosen for what? Emily looked out the rain-streaked window. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Back at the estate, they laid the drawings across the study floor like puzzle pieces. Slowly, an image began to form, not just of Anna's memories, but of a map, a section of the estate she had drawn repeatedly, a wing that no longer existed. Clara blinked. That's the East Gallery. Emily stared. It burned down in 1996. Accident? Clara asked. Emily answered without hesitation. No, a purge. They took flashlights and made their way through the overgrown garden path that once led to the East Gallery. Vines had devoured most of it, but they found the old foundation, cracked, charred, covered in moss, and in the center, barely visible beneath soot and leaves, a trapdoor. Emily knelt and pulled it open. Stairs led down, air so cold it burned. This wasn't just a gallery, Clara said, stunned. Emily nodded. It was a vault. They descended in silence. Dust clung to their skin. The walls were lined with old furniture, boxes, fragments of forgotten wealth. But at the far end, behind a broken cabinet, they found it, an iron file. Chest locked tight. Clara picked it. Inside, hundreds of documents, photos, birth records, medical files. Emily found one marked Project Devlin, initiated 1984. She flipped it open. Her hands stopped. A list of names. One stood out. Emily Rose Devlin. Clara gasped. That's not your last name, Emily whispered. It was. Her true identity had never been Taylor. It had always been Devlin. The name echoed in Emily's mind like a curse whispered in a cathedral. Emily Rose Devlin. Her hands trembled as she turned page after page in the iron chest. Each document chipped away the story she'd known, the one her mother had told, the one she had told herself. This wasn't about inheritance. This was about origin. Her origin. And suddenly, the picture sharpened with terrifying clarity. Project Devlin, she read, was not medical nor charitable. It was a private endeavor undertaken by Arthur Bellamy, funded through the Bellamy Trust, aimed at genealogical preservation and behavioral observation. It sounded scientific, academic, but the details were monstrous. Select children, select bloodlines, isolated and monitored from birth. Anna had been the first. Emily was the last. Clara sat beside her, pale. Your mother didn't just protect you from scandal. She was protecting you from being owned. The word hung in the air. Emily closed the file. She changed my name, hid me, gave me hers. That's why she never explained everything. It was bigger than her, bigger than Harold. Her voice cracked. She didn't just save me from shame. She saved me from becoming their experiment. Clara found another file. Anna's psychiatric profile, scribbled across the final page in red ink. Subject showed memory regression. Inconvenient. Recommended closure of case. Closure, Clara realized, had meant institutionalization. Permanent, forgotten. And when Rose tried to resist, tried to expose the truth, she was taken too. Emily stood, her breath shallow. They buried it all. The clinic, the files, the gallery, me. She looked around the burned vault. And now I understand why Harold backed down. Why he paid my mother. He wasn't protecting his reputation. He was buying silence from them, Clara asked softly. Do we tell the board? Emily turned, eyes burning. We tell everyone. The next day, she called a press conference, not outside the courthouse this time, but from the Lancaster estate itself. The grand ballroom was opened, cleared, and packed with reporters. A podium stood beneath the family crest. Emily stepped up and began to speak. She told them about the trust, the clinic, the erasure of Anna Devlin, the incarceration of Rose Taylor. She told them about her name, her birthright, not the money but the truth. She laid out the files, the drawings, the timeline, And then she said something no one expected. "I'm not here to take a fortune. I'm here to end a legacy. This house was built on lies, fear, and power, abused in secret. But it's time those secrets belonged to the people they hurt, to the women who were silenced, and to the girl who was never supposed to remember who she was." She paused. "My name is Emily Rose Devlin, and I remember." The silence afterward was total. Then a single clap, then another, and suddenly the room broke open with applause. Not orchestrated, not obligated, real. Bellamy, watching from a television in his office, went cold. He knew the legal war had begun, but he also knew that in the public eye he had already lost. Emily had done what no one ever had, rewritten the Lancaster myth. Later that night, Emily returned to the ruins of the East Gallery, alone. She walked through the ashes, her mother's photo in one hand, Anna's sketchbook in the other. She knelt where the trapdoor had been, whispered, "You were never crazy. You were never gone. You were just too loud for a house that only wanted silence." She burned the last few records that night, ones too dark, too cruel to let survive. Not to hide the truth, but to end the sickness. And when the flames died, she finally felt clean. The Lancaster estate would never be the same. Neither would she. The estate was eerily quiet the morning after the press conference. Not the silence of peace, but the charged stillness of an empire holding its breath. Emily woke before sunrise. No nightmares, just a strange clarity, as if her mind had finally caught up with the truth her heart had carried for years. "I wasn't born to be accepted. I was born to expose." Downstairs, the staff moved cautiously, unsure whether to treat her like an heir or a threat. Clara had made her position clear. "Emily is the future of this family. Get used to it." But even she could sense it. Something was coming. The Bellamys hadn't responded publicly yet, which meant they were planning something behind the curtain. That something arrived just after noon. A knock on the estate's great door. A legal courier, crisp and humorless, handed Clara a sealed document. "To Miss Emily Devlin," he said, then turned without another word. Inside, a formal cease and desist filed by Thomas Bellamy and signed by 3 remaining board members who had flipped overnight. The claim? Emily's documents were fabricated, her mother's testimony unreliable, her claims to inheritance invalid. The war had begun. Clara paced the study. "They're trying to force you out with a fraud accusation. If this sticks, they'll bury the investigation under defamation and psychiatric delusion." Emily didn't flinch. "Then we don't fight back in court." Clara blinked. "What?" Emily's voice was calm, electric. "We fight back in public." She scheduled an emergency broadcast that same night, live-streamed to millions. Clara warned her, "If you go live, they'll hit you where it hurts." Emily answered, "They already did. I'm still standing." The stream went live at 8 p.m. Emily appeared not from a podium, but seated in the estate library, surrounded by documents and photos. The camera close enough to see her eyes. She said nothing for 10 seconds. Let silence work. Then she began. "You've heard their story. Let me show you mine." She walked viewers through each chapter: her mother's arrest, the institutionalization, Anna's drawings, the name change, the vault. She displayed files on screen, showed birth records, displayed bank receipts. She didn't raise her voice once. She didn't dramatize. She simply told the truth. And then she dropped the final piece. A recording of Arthur Bellamy pulled from a private call 10 years ago, intercepted and buried in a court case that never saw trial. In it, Arthur's voice. We all agreed. The Devlin girl was unstable. The less she knows, the safer everyone is. Her mother was collateral. I have no regrets. The broadcast cut back to Emily. She looked straight into the lens. I was never unstable. I was inconvenient. And now I'm inevitable. The internet exploded. Bellamy's legal team scrambled. 2 board members rescinded their support within hours. The next morning, the Lancaster estate received a second notice. Not a lawsuit, but a settlement proposal. A buyout of Emily's claims, a reconciliation package. Clara read it in disbelief. They're offering you a fortune to vanish. Emily took one look and tore it in half. No price is high enough to buy back a stolen life. That afternoon, she met with the full board. Not as an outsider, not even as a claimant, but as a leader. She laid out her proposition. Dissolution of the Bellamy Trust, a full audit of company history, a public apology to Rose Taylor and Anna Devlin, and her official appointment as executive director of Lancaster Holdings Silence. Then, one by one, the votes came in. Yes, 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 Clara voted last. Yes, it was done. Emily didn't smile. She stood and walked to the head of the table. Her voice was steady. I won't rebuild this family in their image. We don't need more power. We need more truth. Starting today, we stop burying the past. We start naming it. She sat, and the room finally understood. This wasn't the Lancaster house anymore. It was hers. The estate didn't change overnight. The walls were still the same. The portraits still hung. The garden still bloomed with roses. But something had shifted. Something invisible, but permanent. Emily could feel it when she walked the halls. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It was thoughtful, watchful, a house that had finally remembered what it was hiding. Weeks had passed since the final board meeting. The Bellamy Trust had been frozen. An independent committee began the audit. Public sentiment shifted solidly. In Emily's favor, Rose Taylor's name was trending for all the right reasons now, a mother who defied an empire. Anna Devlin was no longer a ghost. Her file had been published, her art preserved, her name restored. But Emily felt no joy in victory, only completion. She sat in Harold's old study, the one that once echoed with silence and denial. The desk now held a single photo. Rose, holding baby Emily, smiling despite the weight of the world. I did it, Mum, she whispered. They said you were a problem. But I know now, you were a promise. Clara entered quietly. You're leaving tomorrow, aren't you? She asked. Emily nodded. I've said everything I needed to say. Clara hesitated. You could stay, build it, make it better. Emily looked around the room. I was never meant to live in this place. Just change it. She packed light. Just a few notebooks, the sketchbook Anna had left behind, and the silver bracelet her mother gave her. Everything else she needed was inside her now. She walked through the estate one last time, not as a prisoner, not as an intruder, but as someone who had taken the narrative by the throat and rewritten it with her bare hands. The staff lined the walkway as she left. Some nodded, some bowed, some whispered thank yous. Clara walked her to the gate. What will you do now? She asked. Emily smiled faintly. Live, she said. For the first time. She paused, then handed Clara an envelope. Inside, a final letter, to be opened only if they try to silence another girl. Clara clutched it tightly. You're not coming back, are you? Emily looked down the road. It stretched far, open, sunlit. Not unless someone else needs me to. She left the estate with no entourage, no limo, just a worn coat and the wind at her back. People would tell the story for years. The girl who became the truth, the bride who exposed the blood, the woman who inherited not just a fortune, but the fire to change everything. As the gates closed behind her, the final image lingered, a woman walking away from a mansion of ghosts, free and in control of the only legacy that ever mattered, her own. If you've made it this far, let us know what you thought about the story. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe to catch all our upcoming stories.